My son's name echoed across that rooftop bar, but mine never left his mouth. I stood near the cake table, dressed in my old city bus driver's uniform, surrounded by tuxedos and cocktail dresses. I looked like staff who'd forgotten to slip away. No one greeted me. A few glanced my way, then quickly looked past, as if I didn't belong, as if I'd wandered into something private. They raised their glasses to my son, Dr. Caleb Turner, the new department head. To the golden boy who overcame every obstacle to get here. They didn't know what those obstacles looked like. They didn't see the Christmas mornings I spent behind the wheel at 5 a.m. Or the lunches I skipped so his tuition check wouldn't bounce. Or the trembling hands gripping the steering wheel the day after my 4 drip, because sick leave wasn't an option. I didn't come here to make a scene. I didn't come to beg for acknowledgement. I came to remind him, and all of them, that this party wasn't built on dreams alone. I came wearing the uniform that made it possible. To say, his mother didn't vanish. She just stayed quiet for far too long. I didn't always plan to become a bus driver. Back in high school, I'd wanted to be a science teacher. I even got into community college with a partial scholarship. But then my mother got sick. Real sick. And by the time the medical bills started showing up, I was already working full-time at the deli just to keep the lights on. By the time she passed, college wasn't even on the table anymore. Life doesn't wait for your dreams to catch up. I took the civil service exam and applied to the Department of Transportation because they offered benefits. I figured I'd drive for a couple of years, save up, and try school again someday. That was 36 years ago. I still remember the weight of the uniform the first time I put it on. Heavy fabric. Starched stiff. Like it was made to remind you, this job isn't about you. And for me, it wasn't. Not anymore. It was about Caleb. He was just 4 months old when I started my first route. I'd leave before sunrise, drop him off at a neighbor's, and drive from one end of the city to the other, 8 hours of stop signs, brake squeals, and people yelling that you're too early or too late. Every week was a jigsaw of missed birthdays, school events, and unfinished dinners. I was always arriving somewhere too late or leaving somewhere too early. But I kept telling myself, it's okay. He'll understand one day. There was this winter, God, I'll never forget it, when the heater on my bus broke down. It was below freezing outside. I drove with gloves so thin I couldn't feel my knuckles. My supervisor said I could call it in, but that would have meant docking half my shift pay. And Caleb had just started his SAT tutoring. I couldn't afford to lose $1. So I drove. Shivering. Crying quietly during red lights because my joints hurt so bad I thought they'd crack open. And still, I showed up. Always. That's the thing about mothers like me. We don't make noise. We don't ask for parades. We just show up. The house Caleb and I lived in was a 2-bedroom rental, small, a bit drafty, but it had a decent view of the street. On my days off, I'd sit by the window and watch for the same buses I used to drive, counting how many were late, silently empathizing with the woman behind the wheel. I didn't have much, but I had a rhythm. Work, home, save. Repeat. When Caleb got into med school, I cried alone in the bathroom, trying not to wake him. He didn't know that I'd skipped every single lunch for the past 6 months to put aside a little more for his tuition deposit. My coworkers thought I was dieting. I let them believe that. Every morning, I packed him breakfast, tucked a little note under the napkin. He stopped reading them after the first year, but I still wrote them. Just in case. At the time, I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary. I wasn't trying to be noble. I was just doing what needed to be done. But I look back now, and there's this hollow ache, not from regret, exactly. More like invisibility. Because the thing about driving a bus is that no one remembers the driver. They remember where they got on. They remember where they got off. But never who got them there. And I wonder, when Caleb walked onto that stage to accept his promotion, did he remember? Did he think about the woman who drove through snowstorms and skipped lunch breaks and missed her own birthdays just so he could have the chance? Or had he already forgotten the route I drove to get him there? I used to think Caleb was proud of me. Back when he was little, he'd wait by the window at exactly 5:12 p.m. each day. That was when my route ended. He'd run to the door the second he saw my bus pull into the block, waving like I was a celebrity. I still remember the way his small arms wrapped around my waist as soon as I stepped through the door. "Mama, you smell like outside," he'd say, wrinkling his nose. Then he'd bury his face into my jacket anyway. Those were the good years. When love was simple. When he didn't know the world had hierarchies. But kids grow up, and the world teaches them fast. I first noticed the shift in 3rd grade. There was a "what your parent does" day at school. The kids brought in props, briefcases, stethoscopes, business cards. Caleb brought in a plastic bus from the dollar store. I offered to wear my uniform and come speak to the class, maybe hand out little maps and toy steering wheels. He said maybe. Then the night before, he asked me not to come. He said the teacher had changed the schedule. I found out later she hadn't. I didn't confront him. I just nodded and packed his lunch a little tighter the next day. He was 9. By middle school, he started walking a few blocks away to be picked up, didn't want anyone seeing the transit car. One day, I caught him telling a classmate I worked downtown. That was technically true. But we both knew he meant something else. The funny thing is, I never blamed him for that. I knew what it was like to want to fit in. To not be the kid with scuffed shoes or off-brand clothes. Kids can be cruel. And Caleb was already different, smart, sensitive, soft-spoken. The last thing he needed was extra reasons to be a target. So I swallowed it. The truth. The hurt. The 100 little erasures. I let him rewrite me in small ways so the world would take him seriously. He got a scholarship to an elite private high school, full of kids with hedge fund last names and politician parents. I couldn't afford the tuition gap, but I found a weekend cleaning job at the DMV and picked up 2 overnight shifts a month. I told him not to worry. That everything was covered. And it was, just not by rest. One day during parent-teacher conferences, I showed up in my uniform, straight from a 10-hour route. My eyes were burning, my neck stiff from hours of traffic. I walked into the hallway and caught Caleb in mid-sentence, talking to a classmate. I think she works in transportation management or something. That word again, something. He saw me. Froze. I smiled and waved. He waved back, but there was this tightness in his jaw. That kind of polite panic kids have when someone pulls back the curtain. I didn't say a word. Just walked past and signed in. But that night, I cried in the shower. Quietly. Because the last thing I wanted was for him to feel guilty. Because shame can grow roots, and mothers are supposed to carry the weight, not pass it down. By the time he graduated, Caleb had all the polish the world demanded: honor cords, recommendation letters, perfect diction. He stood on stage and thanked his mentors, his teachers, even his dog. He didn't mention me. I clapped anyway. Harder than anyone else in that auditorium. Because that's what mothers like me do. We cheer from the back rows. We serve dinner last. We sit in overheated buses with aching knees and pretend it's just another day. We let our sons eat first. Retirement came quietly. One morning I stepped off my final route, turned in my badge, and folded the uniform into a plastic bag. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I just walked home with my hands deep in my coat pockets, letting the cold bite a little harder than usual. That first week was strange. The kind of strange that creeps in at 7:10 a.m. when your body still wakes like you've got somewhere to be. I cleaned out the pantry. Reorganized the closet. Watched 3 seasons of a cooking show I didn't care about. I told myself it was rest. But no one tells you that rest feels a lot like silence when no one calls. Especially not him. I hadn't heard from Caleb in weeks. Nothing unusual, he was busy. Always had been. Still, when I saw his name pop up on my Facebook feed, my chest fluttered for half a second. It was a tagged photo from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. An old colleague who used to ride my bus in the mornings. The caption read, "So proud of our new department head of cardiology. Celebrating Dr. Turner's big promotion tonight at Skyline Lounge. Party popper #proud friend. Skyline Lounge. A rooftop bar in the city. Dress code. Bottle service. Reservation only." There he was, in the photo, Caleb, smiling in a navy suit, one hand tucked in his pocket, the other resting lightly on the back of a tall, elegant woman I'd never met. Champagne in both their hands. His fiancée, I assumed. Behind them stood a group of colleagues, all polished, all camera-ready. Someone held a slice of cake with his name written in gold icing. And there it was. The sting. Not just that I hadn't been invited, but that I hadn't even known. No text. No voicemail. Not even a forwarded flyer pretending it got lost in the mail. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hand didn't move. The room around me faded. It was like falling into a silence deeper than quiet. Then came the questions I didn't want to ask out loud. Did he think I'd embarrass him? Was I not the image he wanted in that room? Or maybe I had already been erased, just not officially. I zoomed in on the photo. There, in the background, was a banner stretched across the glass. "Congratulations, Dr. Turner. You've made it. Made it." As if everything before this, every sacrifice, every scraped-together tuition check, every late-night meal reheated in silence, meant nothing unless it ended with people clinking glasses 30 stories above the city. I closed the app. Stared at the wall for a while. Then stood up and brewed a cup of coffee I didn't want. That night, I lay awake in bed, my fingers tracing the edges of my pillow. I thought about the year he got into medical school. The way he called me first, barely able to speak through his tears. How he whispered, "We did it, Mom. We did it." Back then, I believed him. I believed we meant something. But now I saw the truth, sharp and cold. He had rewritten the story. And I had become a footnote in my own chapter. I thought about not going. I really did. For hours, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blurry photo on my phone, the rooftop bar, the smiling faces, the world I had clearly never belonged to. I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need to show up. That dignity looked better from a distance. But something didn't sit right. It wasn't the party. It wasn't even the absence of an invitation. It was that, somewhere along the way, I'd stopped showing up for myself. I'd made my whole life about someone else's milestones, someone else's comfort. I sat in the back row. I held the camera. I sent money. I waited to be remembered. And I wasn't. So I stood up. Walked to the closet. The uniform was still there. Folded neatly in a plastic dry cleaner's bag, tucked between two coats I hadn't worn in years. The tag on the hanger still had my old badge number written in fading Sharpie, 2984. I held the fabric in my hands. Heavy. Familiar. It smelled faintly of starch and lavender, like time had forgotten to move on. I should have thrown it away after retirement. That's what everyone does. Burn it. Donate it. Start fresh. But I couldn't. Not because I was sentimental. Because that uniform had built everything. The food Caleb ate. The roof we lived under. The desk he studied at. The tuition checks. The winter coats. The quiet birthday cakes. It was never just a uniform. It was my body breaking down one bus ride at a time so he could have a seat at a different table. And now, he had it. But he didn't remember the chair he used to sit in. The one at our old kitchen table, where I'd serve grilled cheese at 11 p.m. after a double shift, my feet too swollen to stand but my hands still pouring him juice. That night, I laid the uniform out on the bed like armor. I ran my fingers over the patch on the shoulder. City Transit. Ironic, really. I'd spent my life getting people where they needed to go, and now the only place I needed to go, I wasn't welcome in. I stared at the outfit for a long time. Debating. What if they laughed? What if someone asked me to leave? What if he looked me in the eyes and pretended not to know me? But then I thought of all the years I stayed silent. All the times I smiled through clenched teeth while someone else took credit for my labor. All the moments I swallowed my name to make someone else's shine. Not this time. I got dressed slowly, buttoning each part like it mattered. Because it did. That uniform was not shame. It was survival. It was strength. It was love, unpolished, unpaid, and uninvited. I checked myself in the mirror before leaving. Not pretty. Not polished. But unmistakably me. And I whispered under my breath, not to Caleb, but to myself. You weren't erased. You were just waiting for the right moment to speak. I grabbed my purse. Closed the door. And headed for the rooftop. The doorman looked me over like I was a misplaced Amazon delivery. He adjusted his tie and gave a small, uncomfortable smile. Excuse me, ma'am. Are you with the event? I nodded. The Turner party. He checked the list on his clipboard. Flipped a page. Then another. I wasn't on it. Of course I wasn't. I'm sorry, he started, this is a private. She's with us, a voice interrupted from behind. I turned. A young woman in a catering uniform stood at the service elevator, holding a tray of mini crab cakes. She squinted at me. You used to drive the 84 route down Lexington, right? I blinked. Yes. Every day for 15 years. Her face lit up. You always let my brother and me ride free when our mom couldn't afford the fare. I never forgot that. I was stunned. Too stunned to speak. She smiled. Come on up. You're not the only one who belongs here. The elevator doors opened. And just like that, I rose into a world that never planned to include me. The rooftop was exactly what I expected. String lights overhead. Jazz trio in the corner. Waiters gliding around with flutes of champagne. People posed against the skyline like they were auditioning for a luxury ad. And there, at the center of it all, was my son. Caleb stood with his fiancée, a tall woman with bone-straight hair and a navy cocktail dress that probably cost more than my last tax return. Her laugh was sharp. Practiced. The kind that told the room she belonged here. He looked older than the last time I saw him. Thinner in the face. A little more polished. A little less reachable. I stayed by the side wall, out of the way, near the bar. No one noticed me. Or if they did, they assumed I was working. The transit uniform wasn't a costume. But in this room, it may as well have been. The bartender avoided eye contact. The hostess offered me a tray of olives but not a napkin. A woman nearby shifted her purse closer to her hip when I passed. And Caleb? He didn't see me. Not even once. The cake sat on a gold-rimmed table, white with deep red roses and metallic lettering. Dr. Turner, department head, you made it. I stood there for a long while, maybe too long, reading the words like they were a foreign language. I wondered if anyone here knew what making it really cost. At one point, a man brushed past me and muttered, "Excuse me, can you move that tray?" I didn't have a tray. I didn't correct him. Instead, I stepped back into the shadows near the glass railing. The wind was colder up here. Sharper. I could have left then. I almost did. But then I saw him raise his glass. Caleb stood at the center of the crowd now. He cleared his throat. Everyone turned. I just want to say, thank you, he began. To everyone who supported me. To my mentors. My colleagues. My beautiful fiancé. Polite claps. Smiles. Cameras raised. He continued, it wasn't always easy. But I kept going. Because I believed in myself. And because the people around me believed in me too. That was it. No mention of family. No mention of mother. Just a past scrubbed clean. And something inside me shifted. I walked toward the cake table. Slowly. Deliberately. A few people turned, brows tightening in confusion. A woman whispered, "Is that staff?" I didn't stop. When I reached the table, I picked up a clean glass. Tapped it twice with a fork. The room hushed. Even Caleb turned. His eyes landed on me, and widened. His mouth opened slightly, like he couldn't decide whether to call me by name or pretend not to recognize me. I didn't give him the chance. I raised my glass, voice steady, quiet but cutting through the air like piano wire. To the woman who worked Christmas mornings. To the one who skipped lunch so her son could eat. To the hands that held the wheel when no one else did. To the mother who didn't make it onto the guest list. But made everything else possible. Silence. No clapping. No interruptions. Just a stunned, breathless stillness. I placed the glass back on the table. Didn't look at Caleb. Didn't need to. Then I turned, walked to the elevator, and left the party behind, every floor beneath me echoing with the sound of people finally seeing what they had tried so hard not to. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't need it. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I exhaled for the first time all night, slow, steady, like I'd been holding my breath for years. The ride down was silent. Just the faint hum of floor numbers ticking by and the quiet weight of what had just happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I just felt clear. When I stepped outside, the air hit different. Cooler. Cleaner. Or maybe it was just that I could finally breathe in it without asking permission. I walked 2 blocks before I even looked back. No one followed. No one called out. Not even him. Back home, I took off the uniform one button at a time, folding it neatly on the edge of the bed like I'd done thousands of times before. But this time, something felt finished. I didn't cry. I didn't pace the room wondering if I'd gone too far. Because deep down, I knew there was nothing left to explain. I had said exactly what needed to be said. The next morning, I woke to 2 missed calls from an unknown number. And 1 voicemail from Caleb. His voice was sharp. Controlled, but shaking just beneath the surface. "I can't believe you did that. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. What were you trying to prove?" He paused. Then added. "If you wanted to be part of my life, you could have just said something. You didn't have to make a scene." I stared at the phone. Then I deleted the message. No replay. No second thoughts. Because it wasn't a scene. It was a sentence. One long overdue sentence spoken by someone who had spent decades making room for everyone else's voice but her own. That wasn't shame. That was honesty. And honesty, when you've lived a lifetime being edited out, feels loud, especially to the ones who wrote you out in the first place. For days after, I didn't hear from him. Not a word. But I wasn't waiting. I went for long walks. I made soup. I sat on the porch and watched buses go by, different routes, different drivers. But I knew the rhythm. I could still hear the brakes before they hissed. One afternoon, a woman stopped me at the corner store. "You were at that rooftop event last week, weren't you?" I blinked. "Yes. I was." She smiled gently. "I was there. I'll never forget what you said." I nodded. "Thank you." That's all I said. That's all I needed to say. Because it wasn't about applause. It was about presence. I didn't crash the party to shame my son. I didn't walk in to play the victim or steal his spotlight. I walked in to remind all of them, that I existed. That while they celebrated his finish line, I was the one who built the road beneath it. Weeks passed. Caleb never apologized. Not properly. Not the kind that comes with eye contact and silence and maybe, if the heart is honest, a little shame. Instead, I got another message. I guess this is who you are now. Making me look ungrateful. Making yourself into some martyr. I didn't answer. Because I'm not a martyr. I'm a mother who stopped pretending silence was love. That night, I poured a single glass of wine. Sat by the window. And raised it, not to him. But to the version of me I'd forgotten existed. The one who drove in snowstorms. The one who skipped meals. The one who stayed up folding uniforms and lives into something worth surviving. The one who stood in a room full of strangers, wearing the past like armor, and still walked out with her head high. I raised my glass and whispered aloud, for no one to hear. To the ones who go unseen. Until they stop asking to be invited. And I drank to that. Some people think the hardest part is the fight. But it isn't. It's the silence that follows. The day after the rooftop toast, no one called to say they were proud. No one texted to ask if I got home safe. There was no viral moment. No sweeping change. Just the same old apartment. The same view out the window. The same hum of buses in the distance, this time, without me on them. Caleb didn't call again. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not even to argue. And in a strange way, that was the clearest answer I'd ever gotten from him. I wasn't part of the story he wanted to keep telling. Not because I hadn't done enough. But because I reminded him where he came from. And some people don't want their beginnings to follow them into the places they believe they've outgrown. A week later, a bouquet of white lilies showed up at my door. No card. No name. Just flowers. I didn't bring them inside. I set them gently on the curb by the trash bins. Not out of spite. But because I'm done with empty gestures. People always assume there's a big ending after stories like this. That the child sees the error. That the parent forgives. That someone rushes to the door in the rain, shouting apologies. That's not what happened. What happened was this. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I made breakfast without checking my phone. I sat in the sun and read a book all the way through. And I didn't think about being anyone's mother. I just thought about being myself. And for the first time in a very, very long time. That felt like enough. Thanks for listening. If this story found a quiet corner in your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel ready, share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters. It always has.